Black Wednesday and what it can show us for future currency problems. Now, Black Wednesday was an event that happened in the UK on the 16th of September 1992. This was the UK being forced to leave the exchange rate mechanism. The ERM was basically the coming together of European currencies. This was the precursor to the European Monetary Union we see today, the Euro currency. The exchange rate mechanism basically paired various European currencies together, so the pound had basically a peg to the Deutschmark. Now, it was a floating peg, so the pound could go up and down in comparison to the Deutschmark and other currencies, but it was quite narrow. It had to keep sterling within a range, and basically one of the reasons why the exchange rate mechanism failed for the UK is the pound was set too high. It was basically valued too high when it went into the exchange rate mechanism. The market could see the pound needed to be lower. This is why, as Black Wednesday developed, the Bank of England used £4 billion worth of reserves to try and prop the pound up and to squeeze the speculators who were short in the pound. They also raised interest rates, again, to try and attract people into the market to buy the pound, to bring it back up within the tolerance of the exchange rate mechanism. This ultimately didn't work. A key point always to take away is markets are stronger than bureaucrats. So central banks, governments can distort, they can bend markets for some time, but ultimately history proves that the markets will always win in the end, no matter how long it takes. I think as a side note, this is what we're seeing at the euro currency at the moment. Governments, central banks are distorting the euro, but ultimately the euro, like the exchange rate mechanism for the UK, now will fail. And the point to take away with the Black Wednesday is central banks always must show confidence. Paper money, fiat money has no intrinsic value. You can't swap it for gold, for silver. It has no value other than the confidence that you can take the £10 in your pocket, go to a shop tomorrow and exchange it for goods and services. There's no value other than the idea of confidence that that shopkeeper is going to swap it for goods and services. And basically what the clips I'm about to show you is when a currency collapse comes, and there is going to be one coming sooner or later, whether it's the euro, whether it's the pound, whether it's the US dollar, whether all fiat monies just collapse at the same time. The point to take away is, I'm in a 2-bed house in Buckinghamshire. I am not going to be as informed as the hedge funds, as the investment bankers, as the analysts will be in London, New York, Frankfurt, across the globe. They are going to be the most informed people. So we should probably take our cues from what they are doing. Anyway, let's take a look at the clips here. So this is from a BBC documentary from 1997, which analysed what happened on Black Wednesday in 1992. Let's take a look at the clips and see if there's anything we can learn from these clips.
I want to buy a house!
Watch out, excuse me.
Intended to show strength, the markets perceived the rate rise as weakness and reacted accordingly.
We had a fairly strong sense that we were on to the kill. It indicated to us that we are in at the end game, that there was no, this was an act of desperation. So instead of restraining us, it was really an invitation to double up, to try to sell as much more as possible.
The Bank of England had some £19 billion in foreign currency reserves, but it was now spending £2 billion an hour as more and more people sold the pound.
So a clip there, that's Geroge Soros, who reportedly made $1 billion on Black Wednesday by being a short speculator, basically betting the pound would go down. He took the analysis. Whether you love or hate Geroge Soros, clever guy anyway, at least in these days, 1992, part around the Quantum Fund with Jim Rogers as a side note. He took the position the pound was overvalued, would come down, had huge speculative play down on the short side. But as someone that's sitting in your 2-bed house in Buckinghamshire, like I am, when obviously this was before my time, I was just a kid in 1992. But the point to take away from the average Joe in the street, interest rates going up. You've got the Bank of England, quite a powerful central bank in there, spending £2 billion an hour trying to prop the pound up. This should have meant the pound was rising. But what did Geroge Soros see? He saw that as a weakness move. So when the next currency crisis happens, don't just take your cue from what the government is saying, what the Bank of England is saying. Look at how the markets are reacting, because ultimately that's where the truth will be. Bank of England putting the interest rates up, spending huge amounts of foreign reserves in the market, trying to prop sterling up. That means nothing unless the markets are buying it. Let's take a look at the next clip.
MLR's 15%. 15%. What?
Interest rates 15%.
15%. Effective from tomorrow. 15% MLR.
The interest rate market, which was sitting 30 yards away, exploded in noise. We thought, we can't believe it, the Bank of England's raised interest rates again. That was a sign of weakness, not of strength.
The more those rates go up, the more it's going to be worse for the pound, isn't it? Mortgage rates, no way. 10 done. Dollar mark.
There was a very, very small rally in sterling. It went up maybe a third of 1%, a very, very small rally for such a big rise in the interest rates, and immediately settled back on the floor. And the Bank of England was still buying pounds.
So it goes to show there that the market did blip up. It did blip up. The huge amount of buying that the Bank of England was doing in the market, raising the interest rate, it did blip up. But what happened? The market hugely sold off because they saw it as weakness. So if you're at work, when the next, because there will be a currency crisis at some point, but the thing we should learn from Black Wednesday wasn't, it cost the Bank of England a lot of money. Bank of England reported losing £4 billion of its reserves that day by trying to prop the sterling up. It wasn't, and ultimately, the UK rebounded from that. Ultimately, being out the ERM was probably long-term a very, very good thing. It meant we didn't have to join the euro. But in the short term, that wasn't a particularly bad crisis for the pound. Long-term, the next crisis that hits the euro, the US dollar, yen, pound, wherever it hits next, it could just wipe all currencies out together. The point to take away, it's gonna probably happen to a point, that the people in London, speculators, traders, hedge funds, they're going to be far more informed than you can ever be. You can take a long-term macro analysis view of how you think it's going to play out. But the point to take away from this is the markets aren't always going to react how you predict them to react. So say the next currency, it could be a currency crisis, could be a bond crisis, could be both crises happening simultaneously. Point to take away, any large financial collapse, look at how the markets react. Like if they say, there's a bond crisis, but everything's okay, we're passing these laws, Bank of England going to have huge purchases in the bond market. If the markets react negatively, that means that the people with the informed opinion, the hedge funds, the investment bankers, the analysts, they are not buying it. So you need to position yourself to protect yourself in the same way. So this may not even mean actually buying assets yourself. Doesn't mean you need to go long or short bonds or buy pounds, sell dollar. It doesn't necessarily mean that, because every crisis is different. It's not going to play out in exactly the same way how Black Wednesday did. Now, in the age of algorithms and high frequency trading, currency collapse could happen pretty much within minutes, but I don't think it's actually going to play out like that. It's quite possible that the next currency collapse will happen over a period of months, maybe even years, because we're at zero interest rate environment. They can print so much money, they can try and prop things up for a while, but every time they do something, if the market's not reacting positively to it, that means you need to put yourself in a position where you're just strengthening yourself and your family, because that's ultimately what it comes down to, protecting yourself and your family. So if in the future, this could happen tomorrow, this could happen 5 years down the road, no one can predict exactly when these crises will happen. Say, for instance, you're at work, it flashes up on the radio, huge problems in the forex markets, pounds tanking, something bad's happened. You look on your phone, you're checking the news, central bank, Bank of England saying, oh, we're doing this, we're doing that, but you still see it going down. You need to be prepared in that situation. What do? Maybe you should just leave work, get to Tesco, buy as much as you can before the shelves are raided, go home, protect your family. That is if it's a very fast reacting dynamic environment where the pound is collapsing, it might just go to zero in the space of less than a day. Or, however, quite probable is it will be a collapse over a period of many months. But either way, the point to take away from what happened on Black Wednesday, the Bank of England raising interest rates, doing huge buying of sterling in the forex markets. The market reacted negatively to that because the market didn't believe that what the Bank of England did could last, and it didn't last, and ultimately markets are always correct. But as the next crisis happens, it could happen so quickly that people won't even be able to make YouTube uploads on it. So you should have a game plan in your head if currency, if pound starts collapsing, if the euro starts collapsing, what do you do? Just try and have a vague game plan in your head, but it's going to rely on looking at the markets and see. Basically, take away from this, long story short, don't trust the central bank, don't trust the government, can't even really trust the media because they're just going to be listening to whatever the government tells them. Most people in the media have no idea how forex markets work, or the crisis, the inherent instability in the system. You're going to have to just rely on hedge funds and investors, just see how they're buying and selling in the market affects the market, because as just a normal person, you're not going to be as informed as people in the City of London, Canary Wharf, Frankfurt and New York will be. So those are my opinions anyway. Basically, long story short, don't trust the central banks, don't trust the government. Have a mild game plan in your head, because we are certainly going to see currency crisis coming over the next few years. As you say, it could happen in a matter of minutes. Pound could lose a massive proportion of its value, especially with high frequency trading and algorithms and just how interconnected the world is. But it's quite likely it will happen over a period of months. So use your own intelligence, look how the markets react, because people, you didn't need to be a big city investor. I actually know at least one person that actually made quite a lot of money. He was only, I think, 18 at the time, but he was basically following what the bank, he was looking at how, basically doing market analysis, seeing how the markets reacted to the news, and he did quite well on Black Wednesday. So that's something to have in your pack of decks, trick up your sleeve, because when the currency collapses, you need to just have some sort of play in your head, and it's basically going to be following the markets, how they react. So let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one. Are we going to see another Black Wednesday? My opinion, next collapse is probably going to be multiple times larger than Black Wednesday. Black Wednesday was largely nothing. So Jason from Liberty Bunkers signing off, and I'll see you in the next video.
Me antagonist, birthright plantagenist. I'ma go to the streets with the savages, preach with a spanner and teach them what manners is. Each of you anarchists, understand we protect our majesties. You ain't breaching our palaces, gone weak with your fallacies. When it comes to these geeks, I'm an analyst, left-wing student mannequins. That's the beauty of the challenge, cause the challengers can't challenge us. Talk about austerity when they leech for the cannabis. Went from reefer pacifists to Antifa masochists.